Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Julia Dwario, and on behalf of the Guild, I would like to greet you all for this panel discussion with Beyond Citizenship, Art and Asylum, which will discuss the artist's role in the themes and contexts of citizenship, identity, belonging, and asylum. In the special context of our exhibition, the Chaos Trilogy II, Aliens in a Foreign Land, which Premjish will introduce in a moment. Before that, let me just introduce our moderator and speakers today. Premjish Achari, our moderator, is a curator and writer based out of Delhi. He's the founder of an in-depth curatorial program called Future Collaborations, co-curator of the Bhubaneswar Art Trail 2018, and he was the head of the program and editorial for the exhibition Lokame Taravad, organized by the Kochi Biennale Foundation. He is the winner of the Art Writers Award 2021, issued by Swiss Arts Council Pro Helvetia and Take On Art magazine, the Art Scribes Award by Prameya Art Foundation 2018, and he received the NLAC's Take On Art Travel Grant for Young Critics in 2016. He recently directed The Other Faces, a documentary on the practice of Ravinder Reddy. Achia Anzi is an Israeli artist and researcher who's based in New Delhi. Achia's works have been exhibited on various international platforms, including the Jerusalem Biennale 2017 and the Incheon Biennale 2016. Some of his solo exhibitions include In Every Wadi, Build Yourself a Home at Afula Municipal Art Gallery 2019, Subtle Silence, curated by Avshalom Suleiman at P8 Contemporary Art Gallery, Tel Aviv in 2018, Aleph and Other Stories at the Institute of Cervantes and Threshold Art Gallery in New Delhi 2016. His works were also displayed in the Jaipur Sculpture Park, Nagargarpur 2019, and the Serendipity Arts Festival Goa in 2019. Rakhi Peswani's art practice explores various discursive and material aspects of crafts and the nuanced associations of crafts as languages, with an emphasis on the handmade. Her recent participations include the Martin Biennale 2022, Connecting Threads at the Dr. Bhawdaji Art Museum in 2018, the Colombo Art Biennale 2014, Fiber Visions and Fruits of Labor, a monument to exhaustion, which were displayed at the Hangzhou Triennale of Fiber Arts in 2013, Zones of Contact at the KNMA Noida in 2013, and many others. Her works are currently on view at Jehangir Nicholson Art Foundation's Mycelial Legacies 2, curated by Diksha Nath. Rahman is a contemporary Indian photographer and curator based in Delhi. His most recent participations include Musée Guimet, Paris, 2022-23, the Chennai Photo Biennale 2019, Guangzhou Biennale 2018, Houston Photo Fest in 2018, and Centre Pompidou, Paris, 2017. He has also curated shows such as Delhi Building the Modern at the KNMA in 2017, Sunil Jana Vintage Photographs at NGMA in Mumbai 2015, and Delhi Modern, the architectural photographs of Madan Mahatta at Photo Inc., New Delhi 2012, among others. He is one of the founding members of the Safdar Hashmi Memorial Trust, and he co-curated the Sehmat Retrospective Exhibition, which opened at Smart Museum, University of Chicago in February 2013. Zakkir Hussein's work emanates from life around us, incidents, media images, memories, poetry, and the various resources that trigger his thought process. Some of his participations include Cloak and Dagger, India's Fictional Times, curated by Shaheen Merali at Museum Art Center in Riga, Latvia, 2021. Lokame Tarapad, curated by Post Krishnamachari in Kerala, 2021. Peak Shift Effect, curated by Gayatri Sinha at Vadera Art Gallery in 2013. The Kochi Museum's Biennale 2012. Skoda Contemporary Art Show at NGMA New Delhi 2012. 2012, A Further Global Encounter at Grosvenor Vadera, London 2012. And recent works curated by Kathleen Weimar at the University of British Columbia in Canada, 2003. Welcome, Achia, Rakhi, Ram, and Zakkir. And let me just hand over to Premjish to introduce our context today.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Joey, for that introduction. Thank you, Zakkir, Rakhi, Ram, Achia, for joining today, despite the kind of scheduling clashes we had. It's so difficult to kind of put all of you together, find time for all of you together. And thank you that we made this happen. And it's very important that we are having this discussion. And maybe it's my oversight, but I have felt that discussion on art and citizenship has become really rare, and it is an important discussion that we should continue, uh, maybe in other platforms also, that especially in this crucial juncture where the world is divided into binaries, and also uh, enforcing certain forms of politics that is exclusionary. In such situations, I feel it's very important for us to have the discussion on the importance of asylum and refuge also. And that is why I think this exhibition, the second part of the Chaos Trilogy, that focused on citizenship exclusively, but also looking at what is happening to citizenship in the present context, and how has it collapsed, or how is it also getting reconfigured. What once was defined through the categories or through the parameters of a secular identity is now being getting defined through religious majoritarian belonging. How could we address this? How could we tackle this? And how could we also reimagine and reconfigure citizenship, and also enforce a politics of asylum? So this exhibition and today's discussion is also locating itself at this intersection between art, citizenship, and asylum, and also the indomitable spirit of human resilience. I use this occasion also when we talk about resilience to also remember Vivan, who left us a few months back, and who was also part of this exhibition, and whose political resilience activism has offered immense courage and hope to all of us. Uh, so as I was saying, that in a world that is finding solace in binaries and boundaries, art emerges as a radiant beacon, defying limitations and reminding us of our shared humanity, which we are always forgetting. And it is within the realm of artistic expression that we find the audacity to challenge prevailing notions. And sometimes it is also the reverse, that art also reinforces, I'm not romanticizing art, art also reinforces nationalism, art also tries to reinforce boundaries and stereotypes. So, but there are these practices that kind of raptures out of these situations and these limitations and challenges these societal constructs, and also elevate the voices of the marginalized. And art has an innate ability to transcend the confines of language, culture, and geography, offering solace, provoking thought, and igniting a collective consciousness that propels us towards empathy and understanding. And at the heart of our discussion today lies the delicate tapestry of citizenship and asylum, themes that resonate deeply within our global landscape today. And these concepts, uh, although they are fraught with complexities, stir a multitude of emotions and beckon us to examine the very essence of belonging, identity, and the right to seek refuge. It is within the tumultuous space that art reveals its unrivaled power to intervene, to heal, and also to amplify the voices that have been stifled for far too long. So through various artistic mediums, be it painting, sculpture, poetry, film, performance, all the artists who are part of this show and also who are addressing this issue, whether through the forms of tangible or intangible means, they are weaving narratives that transcend borders and echo across generations. And I salute those unyielding artistic endeavors, uh, those who are becoming, and those works that are becoming catalysts of change, inviting us to embark on this collective transformation. So today's discussion, so we are entering into this dialogue. It is essential that we also remember the profound responsibility that art bears. And it is incumbent upon us as artists, scholars, curators, activists, advocates to create spaces that are inclusive, that amplify marginalized voices, and also that celebrate the rich plurality of human experiences. So by engaging with communities, invoking or involving stakeholders who themselves are marginalized, we have to create an ecosystem of empathy, fostering a sense of belonging and solidarity. So I welcome all of you to this discussion. And the format we are following is that the four speakers today, they will do their individual presentation, responding to the broad theme that has been outlined today through their works, through various events, maybe through other artists or through readings and so on. So they will make their presentations, and then we will enter into a brief discussion with all of them. And you can also share your question answers or response in the chat box, and we'll share that with them too, and they will respond to that too. So I'll begin with Ram. Ram, please start. Thank you.
Is that because I'm the
That's the quorum, that the quorum has mandated.
as the oldest person in the group? Okay, I'm just looking at the time. It's 5:14. I have 10 minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm a photographer, and unlike most of the other artists who are going to speak today, my medium is quite directly related to looking at the real world. I mean, there's an aspect of photography which is documentary, which relates to actual seeing. It's less abstract as an art form, but it can be used in multiple ways. And given the topic today, I thought that I would really show my body of work, which is actually quite directly activist, as a citizen artist. And the title Aliens in a Foreign Land, or this idea of asylum, for me, what I'm going to be showing you are people who I actually regard as looking for asylum within our society and within our country. And they are fellow citizens, but I see them as aliens in our own society or aliens in our own nation. And I begin, Juhi, should I share my screen?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, that's me. And I'm going to begin with the set of photographs which I did in 1984 after Indira Gandhi's assassination. These were not the kinds of photographs that I normally did. I was not a photojournalist, but I had gone to help with a group of people for relief in an area of Delhi where, this was of course in October, November 1984, when the Sikh community was attacked across Delhi very viciously in a pretty organized manner. These few photographs that I did have become kind of iconic photographs of that moment. And I'm going to show you the kind of life that they have had and trajectory. And I hope that this relates to this idea of how somebody doing creative work like this can actually have a very broad effect in society, in a sense outside conventional art space. This was a number of years ago. Arpana Kaur, the artist, along with some lawyers who've been fighting for the rights of the victims of 1984, had organized an exhibition of photographs taken of the violence in 1984, which traveled from the Golden Temple down to Delhi to the Bangla Sahib Gurdwara. And above me, you see my picture of Nanki Kaur holding her husband's finger in her hand. The finger had been chopped off to remove his gold ring. So these trucks traveled across North India with these images as a reminder, as a reminder of the conscience of these victims who had suffered and have up till now actually not got justice. Why is this not? Oops. This is not moving. They were exhibited outside the Gurdwara, Bangla Sahib in Delhi, completely public. And here was a text of the Justice Attorney H.S. Pulka, who's been fighting for their rights. And an incredible coincidence happened when Nanki Kaur, whose photograph I had shown you, whose name I had actually not written at the time, I had written the name of her husband. She came and she discovered this photograph, and it became part of the charge sheet because of it being shown outside the Gurdwara. So this is a strange history of how these images, which were taken completely out of concern, have become part of a judicial history in the long term and have become iconic for the Sikh community to remember this violence. Safdar's death in 1989, 1st of January, my photograph, again, which became an iconic image of his funeral, led to the formation of Sehmat. And after the Babri Masjid demolition, this was a poster broadside, which I designed with my graphic design training, incorporating ideas, texts from myself, from Rajendra Prasad, Geeta Kapoor, Madan Gopal Singh, taking various historical texts, art history, looking at aspects of what that demolition had brought up, anxieties in our facing what we had thought was a secular nation, which was shattered at the time of that demolition. And of course, the history we are facing now, the situation we're facing now really emerges from that. But this broadside as a graphic became a kind of map for what happened later on, which was actually an event in Ayodhya on the Ghats in August 1993, which was on August 15th, commemorating Independence Day, which was a performance theater space. And it was the first time that people had actually entered Ayodhya after that horrible event, because there was huge tension there, but we managed to bring artists from all over India to reclaim this space as a secular space, as a creative space. What was that? Was there a question? This was
I don't think so. It was a mistake.
Okay. And from that same broadside emerged this exhibition on Ayodhya, which we called Hum Sab Ayodhya, which looked at various aspects of the city, its politics, its secular history, its religious history, its relationship to mythology, travelers, ancient histories. A huge amount of work had gone into this from art historians, sociologists, social scientists, political scientists. And this was kind of a kit exhibition which opened in August of 93 in 17 cities. It was a multiple reproducible exhibition done in offset. And this is an exhibition which is still being shown and is still traveling, not just in India, was even at one point shown at the Press Club in Lahore. This was in Pune, 1994. In another kind of action intervention, Sehmat had done a whole series of projects on the Gujarat riots, along with Tista Setalvad from Bombay, who had been fighting and is still fighting for justice for the victims of the Gujarat riots. And I did a series of portraits of not just the victims, but also people who were activists who were fighting for justice from all over Gujarat. This was done when we brought them to Delhi to meet journalists, artists, citizens, and also took them to meet the president at that time, K.R. Narayanan. And it's strange with the kind of activism that I was involved with that I've seen two presidents actually in tears in their office. Ayodhya, after Ayodhya was Shankar Dayal Sharma, who we met the morning after the demolition. And when I took these victims to meet Narayanan, not just him, his wife, but even his ADC, who was an army man, were all sobbing with tears in the office. Anyway, this was for the 10th anniversary of the riots, commemorating what had happened. Again, a call for justice. This was Gulbarg Society, which I photographed along with Tista in Ahmedabad. And we organized a memorials there for the victims and for citizens of Ahmedabad on the 10th anniversary in 2012. And I mounted these small portraits inside the burnt out ruins of those houses. And this is actually one of my exhibitions that I'm most proud of. And this was a proposal that I had done when we got Shubha Mudgal to come and sing on the anniversary. I was doing these, when looking at the ruins and how to plan a layout. So this is a different kind of artistic intervention in a real space. And I'm going to end with, well, two more things. This is, of course, Shaheen Bagh. The protests, amazing protests, primarily by women against the CAA, which was going to be passed in Parliament, which is still on hold as yet. But this was an amazing protest which happened not just in Delhi, but I saw it in Patna and I saw it in Bangalore. And I photographed it quite extensively. And this was really a people's movement. This was not directed by any political party or any political figure. In Shaheen Bagh, it was primarily the women from Shaheen Bagh who came out on the street, many of whom had never done anything in public before. It was the most incredible, inspiring people's movement. And you see students from Jamia on the left who did an incredible series of wall murals along the walls of Jamia. Actually, this was during one of the art fairs, and I must say, I think that this was some of the better art at the time in Delhi. And this was the aftermath of how to crush that movement when riots were actually organized across the river in Delhi, which I went and photographed the aftermath of that. This, of course, is Munshi Premchand, image lying in the burned out school, which was completely demolished and destroyed, and the mosques which were burned at that time. This, of course, was a show mounted by the Guild in August last year. And I wanted to show you how many of these aspects of my other work entered into this work, which is in a gallery space. This was in Bikaner House. And here I combined many of these issues through looking at architecture and site. And this was an installation which I called Site of Conflict, where different cities, different buildings have become contentious, starting, of course, with the demolition of much of Delhi's classical modernist architecture, which was famous all over the world. On the left, you see the Hall of Nations, which was built for the 25th anniversary of India's independence, which was destroyed in 2017 by Modi. And this combined many of these issues: Ayodhya, the Sikh riots, including my history in New York with the demolition of the destruction of the World Trade Towers, etc. But this was a way of integrating a kind of human conflict through architecture. And this, of course, as I said, was in an art space. bringing in the history of what was happening in India Gate with the Lachian's Chhatri, where the statue of King George had been removed. My father had been involved as chief architect in the late 60s and early 70s in that issue, when he and other public figures objected to the installation of Gandhi inside an imperial site and an imperial canopy. And they said, and they all felt that the empty canopy really symbolized our independence more than anything. Of course, Modi inserted Subhash Chandra Bose there. And part of what I was talking about is that, what these actions which the government is doing now are not democratic. There is no discussion, there is no consultation, either in parliament or in public, as opposed to previous years, previous days, when there were huge discussions in the press, in parliament, letters were replied to when you wrote to the prime minister or various ministers, etc. And all of that, of course, now has come to a halt. So I'm going to end here. This is just a little intervention on a certain kind of practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you for guiding us through this series of unfortunate events of Indian history, but also exhibiting iconic institutions, iconic events, and also reflecting on the secular history and the particular moment of that history and its relevance, and also showing us that how it's slowly collapsing. Thank you for your presentation. Achia, would you like to start?
Sure. Let me just share. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can see it. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Premjish, both for the invitation for the exhibition and this discussion, because the issues which we are raising are very important in the Indian context and outside. It's interesting that I'm going to speak after Ram, because my perspective is very different in terms of documentation. And at the same time, there are several connections, so I will try to establish them as well. Since Ram mentioned Sehmat, so my project started with an open call of Sehmat, celebrating Constitution at 70, something like this. I can't remember the exact title, but I was, the idea was, I think many people felt at that point, maybe still, that the Indian Constitution is under threat in several ways. And the way that India was conceptualized to begin with is now heading in a different direction, etc. Things are known. For me, it was an invitation to reflect on the Constitution itself, the meaning of the Constitution. And while, going and reading the document, some things that we usually don't do, what was striking for me was actually the illustration of the Constitution, which were made by Nandalal Bose and a group of students from Shanti Niketan. So I will start. I don't, this is the image of the display, which I will show later. But one of the issues which were discussed in that exhibition was, again, citizenship, perhaps from a different perspective. But I was very intrigued by the illustration of this page. I invite all of you to go online and find the illustration. I think they're also available on Wikipedia. And each one is coming from a different period. I will read the text, my artist note later on, but I will start just from my point of departure. If you will look carefully at the image on the screen, you will see that in the chapter on citizenship, accidentally, we have the Vedic period, if I'm not mistaken. And you can see different sadhus, rishis, you You may call it in whatever way you want. On the screen, I will try to, 1 second, yes, this will help me. So the figures of the sadhus are spread around the forest. One can read this image in so many ways. Obviously, the combination between architecture and nature, human beings and animals all the way around, all of them form one body. And one of the imagination of nationalism that the idea is to revive a certain point in the past in which there was a kind of coexistence or a perfect harmony between the nation and its environment, language, culture, etc., etc. What was striking for me when I was looking at those images, that they obviously represent only limited number of traditions in India. And that was my point of departure, to explore in what way we can read the Constitution instead of from the perspective of the text, of what the text is enabling, allowing, stating, and so on and so forth, to what the text is perhaps hiding, not revealing, suppressing, etc., etc. And I think looking at the illustration, it's a great opportunity because they in a sense, they have they are located in an in-between space. What do I mean to say? On the one hand, they are legally not bound in at all. There is no meaning to what kind of images you will put in the manuscript of the Constitution. This is, of course, the English manuscript. There is another one in Hindi. So legally, they are not bound in any way, and that gives a kind of freedom, if you wish. So it means that the people who wrote the Constitution did not need to debate about the kind of images that we see in front of us. But on the other hand, there are obviously the illustration of the constitutions of India. They are very, very important symbolically. So it is precisely because they are showing what is important to India as a nation on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's not a legal document. They are not integral part of the document, that they can tell you a lot about what in my eyes, the Constitution presupposes, yet does not reveal. And I think what we see here in this aspect is this very problematic notion of citizenship. But that was one project. I'm not going to elaborate on this. I wanted to continue and think about the meaning of citizenship. And I would like to read my artist note, which was developed also from some research that I did. So I'm going to introduce it and then discuss some of the artwork that I made. The nature of the state is an ongoing art-based research project that explores the notion and function of constitutionalism, comparing pre-modern and modern political formation. The project underlines the convoluted relation of the modern state with what Hobbes calls the state of nature. So what I'm doing, I'm comparing the Greek perception of the police and the modern state. And this is one sentence that explains the difference. Of course, when I'm reading it from the note now, it is done in a simplified manner, unfortunately. Whereas Aristotle perceives the Greek police as a natural entity and hence criticizes an excessive use of laws. This is my reading of Aristotle. Aristotle describes humans as a political animal. What it means is that we are naturally inclined to be with one another. We don't need to justify our police, our being with one another. This is something which is given, like nature. We just have to perfect this kind of being together. And this is done through laws. So it means that the human society is not established by laws, but actually it is something which is natural for us. On the other hand, Hobbes defined the Leviathan, that is the Commonwealth, as an artificial entity. This artificiality finds its most vivid expression in the modern constitution that inaugurates the state through decrees and rules. That's the whole idea of the constitution. So whereas in the open call of Sehma, the idea, the constitution was taken as something which is given unproblematic in a way, only some things that we need to preserve. What I started doing in that project, and more specifically now, is to try to problematize it, to see how the complications which are at the heart of the constitution might inform or influence our way of, living in a modern state. The series of print on display were reproduced, I'm speaking now about the exhibition in the Guild, were reproduced from the illustration of the Constitution of India, drawn by the celebrated artist Nandalal Bose and a group of students from Shantiniketan. The illustration appears at the opening of each section and are organized in a chronicle order from the Mohenjo-daro and the Vedic periods to India's freedom movement. This representation of India as a diachronic entity, means as an entity with history, however, is at odds with the synchronic organization that the Constitution establishes. Synchronic in a sense which is not connected to time. The Constitution is saying, okay, now whosoever is within the boundaries of what is now known as the Republic of India, he's a citizen or she is a citizen. Whereas the Constitution constitutes the state legally, the illustrations reveal that it assumes a polity which is already in existence, and hence the drawings are showing the history of India. So it's not something which the Constitution constitutes, but actually something which is already given. The illustration can thus be seen as a discursive slippages that surface the givenness of the state that the Constitution both presupposes and suppresses. They chart an alternative narrative of state formation that more often than not is in conflict with the constitutional framework. So after giving this introduction, I will try to move on to the next slide, which is not happening. Yes, okay. So let me describe in simpler words what I was trying to do. So what you see on the screen, this is a series of 8 prints. I've taken certain elements from the drawings or the whole drawing, and I used wood blocks that you can see here and here, and inscribe those to inscribe them on the blocks. Later on, we did a simple process of a wood block, but what we left is the impression of the trunk of the wood itself, as you can see all around the frame, each one of them in a different way. In this swastikas that you will see later, there is just an impression, there is no black color. The idea was, of course, to underline the tension between nature and the Constitution. So the wooden blocks, if you wish, they are standing for some kind of broken nature or a suppressed nature, and what we are seeing are those images. Again, these are the prints, some of them with the inscription and some of them are not. It is a work in progress, so I'm planning to expand this. We can see some of the images. I'm going to comment very quickly about some of them. I've given the framework, and the hope is that viewers will interpret the work on their own and make the connection and contradictions or whatever. Green swastika, of course, the combination, the way in which green swastika is used nowadays in different countries under different governments, also in the past. I particularly like this image. And below this, there is a text. Some of the work I attached some text, some of them are just the original title of the prints. So the text that I've chosen for this is a very sweet poem of somebody, of an American poet who is tired with civilization and he would like to run to nature and how we find solution and so on and so forth. But this very romantic poet was somebody who supported slavery. So one while visiting the exhibition needs to Google a little bit to get some kind of information to the contradiction that we find, the way that nature is being used, the way that nature is being portrayed. And the idea is to expand what the prints are doing and what the project is trying to explore in a more theoretical way. We can see on the right an image of Boss saluting. And interestingly, the attempt of the illustration was to create a kind of, how to put it, a consensus, like to show how different opinions of leaders of India are actually come together, even though they disagree about certain things, they all belong to one nation. And next to the portrait of Netaji, you find the text that is calling Gandhi the father of the nation. It is coming from a famous message on the radio which is addressed indeed to Gandhiji by Bose. But if you read the whole text, which is not given in the print, he is actually criticizing the approach of Gandhi. So that was one element of trying to analyze and expand the context of those prints. The last ones that I'm going, there is a missing Buddha on the right, and there is just a trunk that I left the impression of the original tree. But the last things that I want to discuss is that, of course, the attempt of a liberal regime is to show, multiculturalism, all the identities, and everyone is seen. What we see here is a portrait of Tipu Sultan, which is, transformed, it's upside down, and Lakshmi Bai, and the way the text is, which is below the title, which I've given to this, is Tipu Sultan looking at Jhansi Ki Rani, looking at Tipu Sultan. Of course, what connects both of them is not only fighting against the British, but actually their marginal identities. I think I will stop here.
Part of citizenship, secularism, and also these binaries that emerge from it: nature, culture, modern, traditional, and all. Thank you for that. Zakkir, please go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Premjish, for inviting me to participate in this intriguing show. And thanks for all artists who's participating. This is the works right now I'm exhibiting here in the Guild Gallery. That actually it has a kind of relationship with my old works. Before that, going to describe these works, I have to clarify from my side what kind of language I am practicing in this right moment, because of there are a lot of political analysis and essays and research and so many things on this citizenship amendment bill, and so many painful impacts has on our society, because the society has already divided, but now it has become a painful experience when we are going out of this public space. So somewhere it is because of the ideological power change in the central government. So they are imposing this kind of heavily pain on our daily life. So when I'm thinking about this work, I had a slideshow. I had another works because I had done in 2006. And after showing these slides, I will come to the present works which I'm exhibiting right now in Guild, because this I started in response towards Godhra riots, because it is very far from Kerala, because we know that a lot of newspaper clippings and other news medias, they're exposing these kind of very violent atmospheric kind of images. We can see so many things in such medias. but I don't want to go to BBC and so and other things because it is very polemical. And this thing I started, when I'm thinking about this exile, I'm basically doing so many drawings in my sketchbooks to begin beginning a work. Before beginning a work, I did a lot of drawings. So when I'm doing these drawings, and because exile in my heart, I put a lot of houses on the hand of a female body, and it was not satisfied me. Then I decided that uh, accidentally I put half female body underneath, and I felt that it is coming out well. Then I did a very huge, huge work in the sense that the size is important, because the small size, it will not work out. Then I decided to go to some 8 feet and 5 feet, 8 feet length and 5 feet. So this has happened in that time. It's titled as Exile Dog 2006. Then this time I was thinking about the possibility of the works because of the recent this Delhi riots in the time of the Steinberg strike, and related with unleashing violence. Because of, I am thinking about the basic needs of the citizen. Actually, this time I am thinking upside down houses, and on the top uh, I put it a female body, her umbilical cord cut from the entire house, and one child is hugging her leg, like that. Then again I'm thinking about how to become more powerful, to give such kind of atmosphere, to give some more strength. Then I am thinking about this exile of the person who is crossing the seas and crossing rivers, that time, especially Rohingya and other exiles around the world. So I put it on the boat, and I joined with cut bodies of animals on the bodies of citizens. Then I call them as citizen, because the dominant culture seeing these people as mere animals. So I thought that it will give much more power to the language. So then next verse is I showed here, exiled home. And again, I did another works which is part of exile, but it's also related with the very the social atmosphere in Kerala, because in 2000 there are part of development, there are a lot of people expel their own space, and they are drifting like anything in the air, so I was imagining to make a row of buildings, or I was that time to refer this kind of buildings which is happening in Kerala. Then I put it 3 figures underneath. Then I feel like they are nowhere. They are suspending on the space. Though I think it is strengthening the idea of impermanent aspect of life in my social surroundings. Then again, I want to explore the same aspect of exile as a form of female body connected with a lot of upside down houses. Then here I changed the form of the upside down houses, and then I tried to connect with female body, and I put it on a hospital stretcher. Because if I put it on the earth without mentioning or without putting her on the hospital stretcher, it will become much more romantic, because the hospital stretcher itself convey a kind of morbid idea towards reality. So, yeah. At the same time, I use another kind of exploration of the exiled home. Here also, you can see that upside down houses balanced by a female body. This aspect of chaos is always part of my work because it is my conscious defense of myself. How? Because I studied in Baroda, and at the same time I was working among a lot of people who is, you know, searching for media images and so many things. So I have to defend myself in the sense that I have to struggle myself to create a kind of unheard voice which is hidden in the social pain. So I was thinking to better to concentrate the life around rather than following a kind of images which has a kind of historical meaning already there. So I consciously avoid those kind of references, and I am truly concentrating the surrounding life and its complex atmosphere which is trapped in this kind of situation. So this is my one of the etching I did in 1997 when I was a student, MFA graphics. This is the second one. This is untitled, very small etching. And this also because I am showing because how it is related with my present works. And then 2018, I'm not saying the word I'm going back to my old imageries, but this world of my language intertwined, because there is no past and present. Because in 2000, when I was studying in Baroda, this kind of tension was there in the atmosphere. So when ideological change has in place, or the ideology changed the power system, then this aspect of power and its new laws and it imposed the human life has become much more visible, and those people who is witnessing these kind of things has become muted because their voice has become diluted. Then I have to give the kind of voice because I am part of it. I don't claim that I am giving a kind of voice to them, but I feel that my body is receiving such kind of pain. So I use this kind of hospital images. These are hospitals beds. I did it is before Corona in 2018, and underneath I put a small female body. There are so many things happen because when it is coming on the top of the hospital bed, it has become a kind of riot. People are, I don't have that detail. People has become fighting each other. So when we are in a morbid kind of state, but after that we are, that's the kind of thing our system always doing. How can these new laws can make the people one side as safer and one is not safe in that sense. This is a kind of very kind of dividing people on the basis of their caste and religion. So this is the detail of the images of the hospital bed. And again, people are become violent each other. People are against each other. And this kind of reference are coming here. Yeah. These are the detail of the works. These are actually very big works. I think it is 78 inches, 82 inches in size. This is the central part of that work. And this one, female body, fan, female dresses, fan, and two female figure. Somehow I am trying to address a certain kind of violence and repeated kind of violence which is coming through the news and and it is there in the social system towards attack towards the female body and all. This also I did recently in 2020. It is titled as, it's a drawing. It is titled as Citizen, Woman, and Self. It's a triptych drawing. And the later I did this painting in 2020-21. Its title is Pages from the Desolate Landscape. It's a polytriptych. It is size is 153.5 centimeter, 3.9.4 centimeter, 2021. So I cannot, very difficult to, explain this whole kind of process in my works. Because the most important thing in this work is there are a lot of text. And here it is the figure, mostly some of the areas, this image is coming repeatedly because the body of the person who is not metamorphosing, but he's attached with half-cutted male, half-cutted animal body and a tree trunk, which it reflects our vein or it reflects our inner body parts. So I call this image as citizen. So that way I am trying to evoke certain kind of segregation which is happening in our mind, in our innerness. Then that inner effects have the power system easily to divide the people into fragmented and painful reality. So when I was doing this, I scribbled some text on the painting. Actually, I read like this: I am already dead or killed. My soul is doing all these things. What is the language of a living killed person? Now his body comes out from the open jail, and the soul, I find the language of broken tongue, how broken tongue speaks. So this kind of text also part of that polytriptych work. This I exhibited in Delhi, the show organized by Guild Art Gallery of the 25th years of Guild Gallery. So that piece, so I want to show the feeling of rejection in my language. So I told you that I started with so many drawings. Then the last image as the part of rejection, as the part of a kind of rejection that in language itself, I want to express that. So I put this mark, this negation mark, this wrong mark on the painting. Then I exhibited along with that painting. This is the work. Yeah, this is the sign. Then the thing I felt that when I was masking this area of my painting, then I felt that I myself edited, just like so many writers also forced to stop their writing, especially Perumal Murugan from Tamil Nadu, because of his writing addressed with this kind of complex issues. The authority or he himself forced to stop his own writing. So I feel that I have to address such kind of issues, such kind of unfreedom as a part of my language. Yeah, there are a lot of other works to show, but I feel that it's fine to stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zakkir, for showing these fragmented experience, the mutilated experiences of displacement and disenfranchisement. And I see a wonderful connection emerging between all three of your presentations that take us through this landscape of this displacement that is happening internally, where bodies are becoming aliens, citizens are becoming aliens overnight. Thank you, Zakkir. And last, I invite Rakhi. Please go ahead.
Hi, hello. Hi,
Hi, Rakhi. Please carry on.
I'm just going to share the screen. So I think, thank you for inviting me. First of all, I'm really bad at small talk actually, but, and thank you, Zakkir, for somehow like bringing in the question of home by the end of your presentation, because for me, like I've taken up a few works of 3 different artists, and I've also brought in some of my work. The trajectory of my presentation would not be to kind of bring like a comparative thing, but to look at the question of what is home and how can one be representing the idea of home in today's times, because it's a very difficult question in the times we live in. The destabilizing factors that our times have produced are quite not just national, but at an international scale, these questions are an ongoing concern for many people. And in the world of arts, I think like a lot of to and fro, a lot of thinking, delving has been going on. But at the same time, there is a, I mean, I can understand how Premjish has conceived this project, because there's a lot of othering in the world of arts as well. So I think like this is an important discussion to take forward later. I have with me 3 artists, Jairam Patel, Vivan Sundaram, and B.V. Suresh. And then I've brought a series of my works. But before that, I would like to look at the 60s and the 70s and the kind of propaganda that was existing in the public culture and in the state formation in relation to the question of shifts in modernity, actually, shifts that were being traced very methodically and socially in a way. And I was, last week I was in Mumbai, and I was quite like, I've been in that site many a times, even in childhood. That's a very important site. All of you will recognize it. It's the Regal Circle, which is also called, which is also the S.P. Mukherjee Chowk. And there is this statue of Lal Bahadur Shastri with the very beautiful slogan, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. Of course, this slogan has its own history, but we can trace some of the concerns that the state had, the federal state had towards the question of belonging, especially for people who are coming from marginalized and disenfranchised locations. And when federal governments build up on issues that are marginal and bring them center stage, I think they bring a message to the larger public and the question of citizenship. And we can trace some of this also in the currency notes of that time period and a little earlier time period, where you can clearly see the images on the right, the 2 images on the right on the currency note have very beautiful images of farming communities and technologies that are actually supporting farming issues. And this note was later reissued. The left one is the reissued note, which is very much in circulation. The previous one is also very much in circulation. You can see the kind of images these are. And then this note is also now very quickly going out of circulation. I'm just bringing these few images to kind of give a background to the changing times. And we know that with the 90s, there has been a huge shift culturally and economically in the formation and the imagination of the country. And in this kind of a changing state, I wanted to look at some artists kind of like searching for a language, And I have a few images of Jairam Patel, who even when I was studying in college, I think it was very obscure for us to look at these images, even in the 90s. We were not clear what he was doing, but today it is very like palpable, the kind of affects he was working with, the questions of communities and marginalizations that he was kind of like bringing into the framework of art practice and art viewing, art perception as well. And I was tracing, even looking at Premjish's text, I was kind of like thinking through some of the questions I wanted to bring here in the presentation, because these are not questions that we have answers to, but at the same time, these questions in themselves are important for, at least for me as an artist, these questions are important. So one of the questions was, what is home? And what is home, especially for those who are violently displaced by the forces of modernity. By forces of modernity, we can talk about war, we can talk about national boundaries, the question of cities spreading as chimeras, and that is one of the biggest force of modernity today. And again, there are more questions and more forces that are prevalent in relation to homogenization of identities, and what is it to be having a national identity in itself is becoming more and more homogenized. Another question that was affecting me was, can we make dislocation and destabilization as home in itself? And is there even a language that can help us to feel that comfort in it, which is something which is a very difficult task in that sense. And you will see in public culture and public discourse, there's more and more question of spirituality and, you know, calmness and all that. And these things are essentially a kind of a response to the times we live in. And there is a focus or a refocus on one's own body as home and things like that. And that's something that shows us in a very like slippery way the times we are living in. I'll just go further with some of Jairam Patel's work. And all these artists were, in a way, searching for language which was not available readily. And that language was to bring the frame, to broaden the frame, especially in Indian context where material culture is very strong and material culture has a weight that cannot be kept aside. And in that context, I wonder if we can even talk about, you know, the question of language. And do we have the possibility, or what is the language which can, you know, bring some kind of rooting of material cultures? And do we have that possibility in the arts? I have titles on the side, so I won't read those. And we also know this, that a disenfranchised individual is also highly vulnerable to propaganda machinery. He or she is highly vulnerable to state-sponsored violence and many other forces that are constantly shifting, and they are even like difficult to trace because of the kind of difficult tracing that capital has today. So some of these concerns are much more destabilizing, and in that, what kind of languages or other tactics of languages one can use to produce a nuanced experientiality for the not just the artist but the viewer as well. And we're looking at B.V. Suresh's 1998 works. I have a few images from Guild's website actually here. These works were first shown in the Faculty of Fine Arts in '98, and then they were shown in Kemol Gallery in Bombay. And clearly there's a thrust towards processes that are much more informal in a way, materials that were not yet being assimilated in their formal overtones, and materials that were very commonplace day-to-day materials, and they were being like repurposed in a very informal kind of, seemingly informal practice, let's put it like this. And that also helps us see how the question of expertise is being critically addressed, or the artist figure is being critically addressed with these works. And I don't have the link for this. I couldn't find the link for this particular video of B.V. Suresh. It's done in 2008, the Golden Triangle Quadrilateral. And I think like this is a very important a departure in the early 2000s in relation to video art of our country. And this also makes me bring this question to the context, how to provide a narrative and a context to a fragmented life. Since fragmentation of everyday life is a manifestation of modernities and propaganda machineries, so how do we generate specific context to kind of politicize than making things apolitical? This large install was called Khamoshi Ki Dastan, and it was a series of smaller structured objects which were, placed in a very like they all had like very simple machineries and tactically made structures which were open structures. And they all had like different kinds of apparatus in a way produced inside the spatial context. The entire install was taken and shown in Sumukha and Vadera Gallery after it was shown in the Faculty of Fine Arts. These images are from Vadera Gallery. I have a video here. I think I'll just paste it in the chat box. If I think I'll just send it across for you all to see it later. And this is another work of his, Canes of Wrath, which most of you would have seen it perhaps in 2018 at the Kochi Biennale. Yeah. I have a few of my works here, and I think like I've brought in works from 2012 onwards, some chosen works. This work is called Inside the Melancholic Object, and it is done in conceived in the form of a gallery site, and it was a small room, so it's been structured around a smaller space to look at how we can translate that space into a different space. The work has a very large set of hanging bulbous elements, and they're all dipped and dyed with coffee and tea. And there are two different kinds of viewing in this work. One which was really up close, very minute kind of miniature format kind of viewing, which was done by hand embroidery, and which had like inferences to the question of body and its dissipation into language. And this larger set of works were more like visceral and smell-oriented works. And each of these forms was hung on a single pivot kind of a nail, so they had a very unstable kind of structure. And this is another work called Fruits of Labor, a monument to exhaustion. This is done in 2013. It's a large structure devised from the form of a tent and various elements on the ceiling, from agriculture tools to children's language blocks and discarded clothes that I had collected over a period of time from streets and embedded inside a quilt, handmade quilt, like a kantha quilt that I made over a period of time. And this was displayed with a sound installed, basically. Premjish, please let me know how much time do I have.
Few more minutes, 2 minutes, Rakhi.
Okay. And this is another work where I had taken out quotations from various authors to kind of make another kind of a space that is labyrinthine in literary sources, and a space that looks at language in a very a space of erasures in that sense, and language that is moving out of its representational arena. All these quotations, I have some of them here with me, Toni Morrison, and all these quotations were singed on the fabric. The fabric was sourced from a immigrant market in Holland, and it's a very inexpensive fabric, and it would be like really like considered very kitschy in its make and all of that. There's Franz Fanon. So on installing the text that is not there basically makes shadows, and you can read the text with through the shadows actually. So yeah, all these footnotes were part of the work in a way. They were embroidered underneath the curtains. Sorry. Sorry. And this was a temporary constructed site, and it was a temporary install, site-specific install, which was done at a suburban residential area. The site was an empty elevator shaft, which was used for an install. And it was called Work Margins. It was part of a pop-up exhibition that students were doing, and this site became an interesting site for me to look at the question of work and in a outside a suburb and all of that. Yeah, I think if I'm done on time, then I'll stop here. There's already a lot of images.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to stop you.
Yeah,
but-
no, completely all right. Yeah.
No, thank you. But it was important that you brought the question of homeland, which is again gaining currency. I'm not saying that we have never addressed homeland before, but I think since the last 2 decades, there have been very intimate forms of reading of the home itself, and also not romanticizing the home, but also problematizing home as a very risky structure itself, or also as a very insecure and violent institution itself. And artists across the world are also again engaging with the idea of home, belonging, identity in a different way. And all of your presentations having that has engaged with the idea of homeland, relating it with also disenfranchisement in different ways. Also pinpointing to the fact of the promises that were made and how those promises were not kept or were not fulfilled. The dreams we were shown, the tryst with the destiny we had, and all of them collapsing, and the kind of eventual journey towards it where we are right now is a very complex journey. And the role of the visuality, I think, of it, all of you kind of shared, starting from Achia, like we can kind of chronologically put it, Achia, Ram's, and your work, Zakkir's work, the kind of visuality of this entire displacement and broken promises, fragmentation that has happened, disenfranchisement, marginality, marginalization that has occurred around us is very important for us to discuss. Central to all of this is, which I want to ask all of you, is the question of representation, which has become really important in the contemporary context. Like, yes, these are issues that has to be addressed via art, but how do we represent? Like, how do we represent the issues of the marginalized? How do we represent the marginalized himself or themselves? What kind of strategies, what kind of ethical considerations and responsibilities do you keep in mind when you are portraying their experiences, stories, and struggles of these aliens, of these marginalized, of these people in the peripheries?
Do you want this is a response? Are you asking me, Premjish, or is
I'm
a
asking all of you, like
general
generally
concern? Yes.
Yeah.
I think I would just take a little step and make it like it's not there only, like all of us perhaps at some point or the other. I'm like second generation of refugee family that has moved during partition. So these are concerns that all of us have faced at some point or the other. The question of identities is also rife with, the actually question is, why are we making identities singular? Why is the state creating that kind of identity which is singular? And that produces a very difficult, violent assumption about asylum and citizenship, So that's something to think about. And of course, like one of the dominant identity is class identity in today's context. And then, of course, now it's also become religious identity that has become really dominant. So I think these are very scary times, I think dangerous times, due to the kind of homogenizing factors that are in place. So I think like asylum, and to what extent, where, and citizenship of what kind, these are also something that artists ask each other, and even in the communities. These are things that are not today. National identity, for example, for artists, it's a very problematic notion, Yeah.
Ram?
Well, I think, as I said, my medium being photography and text, which I work a lot with posters, etc., is a much more direct way of addressing some of these issues, as you have seen a little bit in the presentation I made, it's much easier, I think, for someone like me to, make a direct statement. On the other hand, these issues that have come up, and we're talking about, my very dear friend, Zarina Hashmi, if you looked at her body of work and how she addressed exactly these notions of exile, identity, her identity as a woman, as a feminist, woman from Aligarh, Muslim woman living in New York. Very different from the kind of work that I do, but I was very closely associated with her and associated with her making that work. So there are very different ways of addressing, and I think when you look at her work, Zakkir talked about, the boat of the Rohingyas. Now, how Zarina addressed that was she just made a lino cut of a boat form. That's it. It didn't, say anything more beyond that. But in the context of her practice and of her other work, it was a very powerful image. So I think there are different ways, that one can do that. And, one of the things that in a way bothers me a little bit is the use of English, or the sole use of English language. Because that, keeps a huge section of our people out of a kind of discourse or a dialogue. And this is something I've always, tried to work with actually through Sehmat, using language, multiple languages, if possible. And I, that's something that always bothers me.
Zakkir, Achia, your view?
Can I speak?
Yes.
I think that an artist's political imagination is arising from how he constructs the image. In the sense, how construct the imagination in another way, express his own political side. If you take a look at Gramscian sense of understanding of culture, culture as a tool to control and impose monolithization of culture. He called it as culture of hegemony. When we are looking our situation in India, we can clearly find out that a kind of monolithization of culture is in at the present. That is the impact. That kind of thing has making a kind of painful situation in our land. So it is based on caste hierarchy, in the sense that what we are looking at around the world, we can see a lot of marginalization, imposed exile. When we are going through the writings of Orphan Pamuk, we can see Armenian genocide, which is not allowed to speak there in Turkey and which is allowed to speak in France. And meanwhile, there are a lot of other conflicts had happened in front of, in our time, like Sri Lankan refugees moving from Sri Lanka to Europe and different part of the country, just like I mentioned Rohingya and other parts, even in some two weeks ago, African countries also having a kind of civil violence and and people are expelled from there. There are lot of other exiles are at present. So I feel that in this space, the language itself uh, a kind of complex reality to address. Language has enough to capable to address such kind of thing in a very powerful way, rather than producing some kind of or putting forward a certain kind of already meaningful image in the space. It will not work out. So I think that I have to read a poem by this Federico Garcia Lorca, a collection of poems, Poet in New York. I'll read a few lines from that. Everyone understands the pain that accompanies death, but genuine pain doesn't live in the spirit, nor in the air, nor in our lives, nor on these terraces of billowing smoke. Can you? Oh.
We can hear you actually.
Yeah. Because I will. Nor on this terrace of billowing smoke. The genuine pain that keeps everything awake is a tiny, infinite burn on the innocent eyes of other systems. So I am talking about when I mentioned about Gramsci and some other incidents which is happening in our nation and around the world. And this infinite burn on the other side is the very important aspect as an artist or a writer should address this kind of infinite burn, which is not yet addressed correctly through the images, No, not through the language, especially in paintings. So that's what I am trying to convey through, because my art practice coming from the age of 16 or 17 years old, when one of my friends came with making a poster with a lot of poems translated from Latin American, like Neruda, Octavio Paz and all. But certain kind of posters, which is a kind of very direct message to the people were existing that time. So what we young people use, we just make a very small images, drawn images, underneath a translation poetry, which is very politically relevant that day. So I am trying to always connect this poetic aspect of image and the message. This should be in balance. Otherwise, I think that it won't work out well. So that's all. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
But we heard that very important point, Zakkir. And
as
I was also discussing about the visuality. That is also getting reinforced on a day-to-day basis, concretizing what you said, the monolith, and also the homogenization of identity, the homogenization of culture that is happening around us. It is very important to also discuss about representation.
I have one please excuse me. I have one quotation from Pamuk also. I think that I just say
Pamuk is coming to Delhi soon.
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's great. See, somewhere I am trying to translate in that way. The politics is not our conscious selection. It is a kind of accident which is fall on us without any intention. That's what's we are witnessing right now. I think so.
Thank you, Zakkir. Thank you. Achia?
Okay, I will try to be brief because I think a lot has been said already. I guess the question also hints toward the politics of the gaze, the hierarchy between the one who represents, the one who is represented. One. Second thing, obviously, when you are representing the marginal, you are fortifying the marginality. So these are obvious an important, complicated question, which it's not easy to solve. In my case, I took the easy path. My work is actually a critique of representation, of the way in which the nation, citizenship is being portrayed by the government, by certain people, by hegemony, etc., etc. I want to continue with what Ram said before. And I think the important thing when you when you do deal with marginalized identities, I think the idea is not to treat them simply as identities, but of different ways of being in the world, different epistemologies, different sensibilities. And I think that Zarina Hashmi, in that sense, is a great example of someone who is not speaking about the Indian Muslim culture, or the culture around Urdu, but she is embodying and looking at the world from the perspective of that world. So she's not only the artist who made House with Four Walls or Father's House, or works which are looking more at the culture of Aligarh, etc., etc. But also when she's looking at the Twin Towers and some other work, that immigration, etc., etc., it is all viewed from that world. And I think that is important in not just to represent, but also to see through another cultural baggage.
Yeah, perfect.
There was, Harun had asked a question. The contemporary, which Rakhi had also shared about, whenever minority communities raise their voices against the regime, the government often labels them. The recent one is the anti-national. The term is anti-national, and uses other unethical terms. Harun says, as per my own research, also the majoritarian middle class and upper middle class Indian citizens also strongly believe that whatever the government does is right, and they are rigid in this belief. They tend to blame minority communities for disrupting harmony and not cooperating. And this argument is shifted to who is right and not what is right. And as a young practitioner, how I look into this thing is with a complete neutral, non-biased lens. And this is what his question is. Would anybody like to elaborate on this?
I will jump in if
Yes.
nobody is doing that. I want, in a sense, the answer, I think why all of us are hesitant to respond to this is because in a way, all of us, responded to this question. This is in our practice and in what we discussed already. So how we are trying to think about it, how to undo this monolithic, this very aggressive and a very restricted way in which the regime is trying to confine our perspective about the way in which we live, the way we are looking at the other, etc., etc. I think I want to. So I think this question is in a sense is already answered. I want to speak about what we should be careful not to do. And when you are engaging in conversation with this kind of a very aggressive form of nationalism, many times there is a tendency to offer a softer form of nationalism. You're engaging in a conversation with certain presupposition. You disagree with some of the presupposition, definitely you disagree with the narrative, and yet by engaging with this kind of conversation, there are certain things that we are, blindly accepting, receiving. So I think it is important to while engaging with this kind of question of showing how we are good nationalists, etc., etc., what we should actually question are the foundation of this kind of nationalist narrative. What does it mean? Is the only possibility beyond nationalism is to a kind of universalism, erasing our local identities, etc., etc. Nationalism is always trying to suggest that, right? That the only way not to be westernized, not to get swallowed by globalization, etc., etc., is to be proud of your nationality, is of speaking certain languages and so on and so forth. And many of those ideas, I'm personally in agreement with, but not through that framework. I think the reason why I'm responding in this way is because I find, coming from Israel, I think recently the the discourse is shifting in this direction. People who are opposing the regime now in Israel, to those who are aware, are walking around the streets with flags of Israel and ignoring very complicated issues that we have there. So yeah, that's my thought about the topic.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we conclude, just one last simple question to all of you is, again, like in this attempt to rethink representation, rethink visuality, reimagine, reconfigure citizenship, imagine a politics of asylum and everything, vis-a-vis contemporary art. Is contemporary Indian art conducive to do this? Are there avenues within contemporary art, the institutions of contemporary art, to imagine this inclusive, pluralistic imagination? Do we have that anymore? Or are we also under threat from within also?
Gosh, don't forget what happened to Hussain. I mean, here was probably our best known artist who was in the end exiled from our country. Just shocking. I mean, even now for us to even think that this actually happened. And the man had to die outside his homeland and couldn't even be buried in his homeland. And, this whole question, I think, which is unsaid, but, hanging over all our heads is the recent Man Ki Baat event in the National Gallery of Modern Art. And I think, people are hesitating to talk about that, but it's a very, very important shift which has happened in Indian contemporary art. It's never happened before that, political figure or a party has actually, entered that space in the way that they have entered that space now. And I think, it's a signal to what is going to happen in the future. This is only the beginning. So I think, any thinking artist, any artist has really to think about, already there's a lot of censorship in what one can express or what one can do. There's a lot of fear in the art world, which a lot of people don't talk about, self-censorship, because of the atmosphere that we have been facing in these last many years. So these are contentious issues, and I'm not sure that there's a very positive future for art expression in India and in the near future, at least.
Anyone else? Achia, Rakhi, Zakkir?
I think, yeah, no.
Yeah, I'm trying to connect to what Rahman said about this, because I don't have any wonder to such political artists are now exhibiting in such kind of space, because what I'm trying to convey through my conversation, it is because of the language. So those kind of language can be adopted to any place, any space. That's the problem of the language itself. Is what the artists are doing nowadays. There are kind of imageries that is stagnant in meaning. Whatever Ambedkar has become a part of the system in that sense. I don't want to go through that kind of area because of the whole different identities also assimilated with the right-wing political system, some other way. So how we can create a kind of critical imagery, a critical language in our work is very important. If their historically already stagnated meaning contains a kind of imageries, then again we put and again in that space won't make any sense at all. That's the problem of the language itself, I think so. So what Ram Rahman said is actually I really respect his words, because such elderly, very senior artist is speaking again. So speaking is for revealing his critical position, that is always important, and give a lot of beliefs those who are keeping a kind of critical voice in our cultural space. That is very important. So respecting that kind of voice, but the main thing we are losing in our critical viewpoint is the basic imagery, the kind of language the political artists are producing in India is in question mark, because the power system always protecting those kind of imageries. That kind of imagery has no problem to exhibit anywhere. That's the main important thing. That's the thing I am trying to speak through my works by masking my area of painting or making into marks or stop marks, which is we can see in the public sphere. There's a thing is very important. How to then that's why I'm talking in my beginning that as an artist, he has to defend, he had to critical, he had to find a kind of very problematic space in his own work. He has to fight against his own language, which is existing in front of him, and at the same time he has to create to address such complex issues through his language. Though these kind of very problematic situations we artists are working. I think most of the artists are working like that, but I think in the particular political situation, the artist forced to exhibit, we have to rethink about the language the political artists are doing right now in India.
Okay. Rakhi, Achia,
Yeah, I think
quickly so that we can.
I think institutionally we are not yet ready to really broaden the scope and possibilities. And when artistic practice becomes in some ways illustrative of any propaganda or agenda, it's a question, like you pointed out, it's a question of representation. And in that sense, an artwork is mute unless you create those contexts of representations that don't allow them to be illustrative of propaganda. So I think like whether the artist is living or dead, to create work which becomes untouchable, So in a way, actually, we have to have more institutions that are open to the practices that are broader and much more difficult in that sense to visualize. And, if you think of like patrons of arts, we have only as many, and because there are practices which defy to be pushed into propaganda machinery, but they are being like really not being supported in that sense, There are institutions that are creating interesting artists. There are interesting artists just trying to make ends meet and working along, sitting in schools, doing jobs and, all kinds of things, So I think institutions are not yet ready to take care of some of these concerns, Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Achia?
No, yeah, the institutions are not, if you are comparing with the European institution and museum, they are ready to, accept a kind of decent voice in their museums. They are giving a space to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Achia, yeah, please, let's.
Yeah, I think I agree with whatever was said so far, but I think that apart from the institution, we have a very engaged community of artists who are very politically aware on the one hand, on the other hand, making very rooted in the communities, in the marginalized communities that they are discussing, approaching, etc., etc. I think it is unique looking at other arts in other countries, one. Second thing, I believe in in the power of what we do, not in terms of going to the street and convincing people with what we do in the gallery, but I believe in the intellectual, emotional, and depth of what we do in order to see reality in a different way. So whatever means the weakness of propaganda is precisely that it is flat, that it's not going deep, that it tries to convince through rhetoric, not through depth or mind, etc. So I think our best tool is to do what we do and to engage with what we engage, with the hope that somehow our discourse and artwork will translate into practice.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for reinforcing that belief in the slow future of the art. I'll say, not the immediate revolution, but the slow future, the tiny changes.
That's what we have.
Thank you, and thank you for joining today and also offering these insightful observations. Very important. And I hope that we continue the discussion and other artists, other platforms also continue the discussion. And it's very important to the cause of the politics of asylum, social justice. It's very important to align contemporary art with these causes and also to reimagine, rethink, reconfigure visuality and image making. And Zakkir, your comments were really insightful. And
Oh, thank you so much. And also, I congratulate both the Guild team and Charlie and Premjish to courageously, put forward this kind of subject in a very important exhibition which is happening here. And yeah, I am really happy to be part of this. Yeah, it's a really courageous attempt, and it is a very great step. Speaking out all these things. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So this was the second part of the Chaos Trilogy. The third part is called Out of Here. That is my goal, which is on the ecological crisis from a post-colonial perspective, not yielding to the white world and its ecological perspective, but developing a post-colonial perspective on the ecological crisis and art and ecological practices from South Asia. So that will happen in the beginning of next year, and we will keep you updated. Thank you everyone for joining. And
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For organizing this.
Also, Julie and Shalini, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank
Premjish.
you everyone
Have
for
a great
joining us. Thank you, Premjish, for
Thank you.
moderating this as well.